Hello everyone. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. That way, YouTube knows to keep sharing more stories like this with you. Now, let's jump in. I was driving through the desert late at night, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere near Desert Center, California. It was close to 1 in the morning, and I was by myself. The highway out there stretches for miles with nothing on either side except sand, rock, and those low desert bushes that look the same no matter how far you go. It had been hours since I'd seen another car, and the road felt empty enough that it seemed like I was the last person alive in that part of the world. The air outside was dry, that kind of bone dry where it feels like your skin and your throat are cracking just from breathing. I had the window cracked a bit because the night was cool, but not enough to be comfortable. I'd been driving a long haul, hours and hours behind the wheel, and when you're out in the desert at that hour, your mind drifts in weird ways. The hum of the tires on the pavement, the way the headlights only reach so far and leave everything else swallowed in black, the way the sky overhead is a deep void except for a scattered handful of stars. I was getting tired too. Not the kind where you nod off, but the kind where your body feels heavy, like the road is pulling you down with it. By the time I noticed the ache in my bladder, it wasn't a choice anymore. I had to stop. There wasn't a rest stop or gas station anywhere nearby. I knew that stretch well enough to know I'd be waiting another 40 minutes at least. So I eased the truck over to the shoulder, let the tires crunch onto the gravel, and let the engine idle for a moment while I reached for the door handle. The second I stepped out, the desert hit me like a different world. The silence out there is not like silence in a house or silence in the city. It's the kind of silence where even your own breathing feels loud. And every little sound you make, your boots scraping the dirt, the wind moving past your ears, feels like it's traveling across miles of empty land. The headlights cut a weak tunnel through the dark, making the nearest brush and dirt glow pale and strange. But beyond that, it was endless black. The stars above looked sharper out there, almost cruel in how bright they were. I moved a few steps from the truck, unzipped, and took care of business. It should have been nothing, just a simple pit stop. I even remember thinking to myself, hurry up and get back in the cab, don't waste time out here. Because the longer you're out, the more exposed you feel. As soon as I finished, I zipped back up, turned, and climbed into the driver's seat. That was when it happened. The man was just there. No warning, no sound of footsteps, nothing. The instant I pulled the door closed and reached for the key, he appeared on the driver's side, right up against the glass. 1 second it was just desert and shadows, and the next there was a man's face inches from mine. My heart jumped so hard it felt like it hit my throat. I don't know how he got there so quietly. Out in the open desert, there's no cover, no way to sneak up without being seen or heard. But he was just there. I froze for a half second. Then instinct kicked in, and I slammed my elbow against the manual lock on the door, punching it down hard. The sound of the lock clicking into place was almost the only sound. Then he moved. He pulled himself up onto the step outside my door, pressing his face closer to the glass like he wanted me to know he wasn't going anywhere. His expression wasn't blank or friendly. It was hard, sharp, like a person who'd already decided what he wanted. He mouthed something, his breath fogging a small patch of glass. Then he said it loud enough that I could hear it through the sealed cab. His voice cut through the night like it didn't belong out there. I need a ride. The words weren't a question. They were sharp like an order. My whole body went cold. Everything inside me told me this wasn't right. I shook my head slowly, not breaking eye contact, just letting him know it wasn't happening. The change in his face was instant. His mouth tightened, his eyes narrowed, and he grabbed the handle on my door and yanked. The door rattled against the lock, but it held. He yanked again, harder, his face twisting with frustration. My hands moved before I even thought about it. I shoved the gear stick forward, cranked the wheel a little, and stomped on the accelerator. The truck jerked, the engine roared, and the whole cab shook as I pulled back onto the road. He didn't let go right away. I felt the weight of him still clinging to the step, saw the blur of his arm in the corner of my vision as I shifted through the gears. The truck surged faster, the desert rushing past in streaks of gray and black, and still he hung on. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The idea of him pulling the door open or smashing the glass was all I could think about. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably just a few seconds, he let go. I didn't see where he landed. I only knew the sudden absence of his weight, the empty step beside me, and the rush of blood in my ears as I pushed the truck faster and faster. I didn't dare look in the mirrors. I didn't want to see him standing in the road or running after me. I just kept going, my eyes fixed dead ahead, hands tight on the wheel. The adrenaline hit so hard it wiped out every bit of fatigue I'd felt before. My hands shook. My breath came in short bursts, but I felt sharper than I had all night. The empty desert no longer looked calm. It looked like it could be hiding someone in every patch of shadow. Every mile marker felt like it was taking too long to pass. I drove the whole way to Los Angeles with my chest tight and my stomach knotted. Every time I slowed even a little, my eyes darted to the side of the road, half expecting to see someone waiting there. Every set of headlights in the distance made me brace up, waiting to see if it was him somehow catching up. By the time I finally rolled into the city and saw the glow of streetlights and traffic, the tension broke all at once. My arms felt weak, my throat dry again, and I realized I'd been clenching my jaw for hours. I never saw that man again. I don't know where he came from, or how he ended up in the middle of that desert at 1 in the morning. There are no houses out there, no towns close by, nothing but endless stretches of rock and sand. That's the part that still sits heavy with me. He didn't just happen to be walking along the road. He was there, waiting, like he knew a car would stop. I've been through a lot of long drives since then, plenty of lonely nights on the road, but I've never once pulled over out in the middle of nowhere again. Not unless it's an emergency. That night burned something into me, the way fear does when it grabs you by the throat. The desert has its own kind of silence, and I'll never forget the way that silence broke the second he appeared at my door. That night I understood how quickly everything can turn from routine to danger. One moment I was just stepping out to relieve myself under a starry sky. The next I was fighting to keep a stranger out of my cab, while the engine roared beneath me. By the time I got to LA, I wasn't tired anymore. My body was wired, my thoughts racing. I kept replaying it over and over, like if I thought about it enough, I'd make sense of it. But there's no sense to it. There's only the fact that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and someone else was there too. Someone I wanted no part of. That was the longest stretch of road I've ever driven. And even now, years later, when I think back to that night, I can still feel the weight of him on my step, the pressure of his hand on my door handle, and the sound of his voice through the glass saying he needed a ride. I never forgot it, and I doubt I ever will. Back in the late 80s, I was helping my parents move, and I remember how tired I already was before that night even started. They were moving a decent distance, not just across town, and we were shuttling things from the old house to the new one in multiple trips. I had already hauled a full station wagon's worth of boxes, odds and ends, and small furniture pieces to the new house earlier in the day. My parents stayed at the new place to start arranging things, but I wanted to head back to the old house, my childhood home, and spend one last night there before we cleared it out for good. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd driven that route plenty of times. I knew the roads. I wasn't worried. I had other things on my mind, like all the memories wrapped up in that house and how strange it felt to be letting it go. The gas gauge had been giving me trouble. It still moved, but it never really lined up with reality anymore. At that point in my life, I wasn't exactly flush with money, so I put off getting it fixed. It wasn't something I thought would catch up to me that night. When I got in the car, it showed just under half a tank, so I figured I was fine. Between all the work of loading and unloading and my head being full of everything else, I didn't really notice that the needle hadn't budged in a while. It was well after midnight when it happened. Somewhere along a lonely stretch of state road in Ohio, surrounded by dark farmland and patches of trees, the car sputtered. I pressed the accelerator, but it coughed once, gave a final lurch, and then went silent. The wheel felt suddenly heavier as I steered it to the shoulder. I sat there for a few seconds in disbelief, turning the key, listening to the engine wheeze but never catch. Finally, the truth sank in. I was out of gas. Completely out. The worst part was where I was. About 12 miles from the nearest gas station in either direction. No houses I could see nearby. No payphones, no nothing. Just me, an empty car, and a state road with barely any traffic that late at night. The sky was heavy and dark. Not a moon in sight. Even the stars seemed muted, with thin clouds drifting across them. The air had that cold bite that cuts deeper after midnight, when your body is already worn out. I remember sitting in the driver's seat for a while, just trying to decide what to do. It was too far to walk for gas in the middle of the night, especially along a road like that. I didn't even have a proper gas can with me, so I stayed put. I thought if I waited, maybe someone would come along who could give me a ride, or at least call for help once they reached the next town. The traffic was rare, though. Every 15, maybe 20 minutes, a pair of headlights would appear in the distance. Most times, the cars just kept going, flying past me without slowing. A couple times I tried to wave my arms, but people either didn't notice or didn't want to. I couldn't blame them. A lone guy standing by his car after midnight on a rural road doesn't exactly scream safety. Eventually, I climbed onto the hood of the station wagon. It gave me a little height, and I thought maybe I'd be more visible. Plus, the metal still held some warmth from the engine. I sat there, hugging my arms against my chest, watching the road, waiting. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours. The silence between passing cars was so deep that every rustle of grass or creak of cooling metal felt amplified. Then, at about 12:30, everything changed. Out of nowhere, 3 sets of headlights appeared almost at once. 2 from the west, 1 from the east. But what made my stomach drop was that the lights blinked off before the cars even reached me. Suddenly, I could only hear the engines, all 3 roaring toward me in the dark, fast. They didn't slow until the last second. Tires screamed on pavement as they slammed on the brakes, coming to a dead stop within feet of my car. All at once, doors flew open. 5 men in uniform came at me like a wave, guns drawn, pointed directly at me. The flashing red and blue lights never came on. Not once. Just darkness and the harsh outlines of guns and hard faces. My body went cold. For a split second, I froze, unable to move, and then their shouts hit me, sharp, commanding, full of danger. I slid off the hood and dropped to my knees before my brain even caught up, hands laced behind my head like they demanded. The gravel dug into my knees, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. They surrounded me, 2 of them holding their guns steady while the others tore into my car. They opened every door, yanked things out, tossed them onto the roadside. A box of kitchen supplies, a bag of blankets, a couple odds and ends my mom had packed. They didn't care. They just kept ripping through, shining flashlights into every crevice, pulling up floor mats, checking under the seats. Meanwhile, the same 2 questions kept hammering me. Where is it? What did you do with it? Over and over, their voices sharp and demanding. And over, I stammered back that I didn't know what they meant, that I didn't have anything, that I was just trying to get back home after helping my parents move. My words felt thin, useless, drifting away into the night air. They didn't want to hear them. Time twisted. It could have been 5 minutes or 50. My knees ached. My arms shook from keeping them locked behind my head. My mind ran circles around itself, trying to piece together what they thought they were going to find. Drugs, money, something illegal. That much was obvious. Whatever it was, they were convinced I had it or had done something with it. Then came the moment I'll never forget. They stopped moving, stopped talking. The night went quiet, except for the sound of the wind brushing through dry grass at the edge of the ditch. 2 guns still pointed at me, but the others just stood there, looking at my scattered belongings on the road. My chest tightened. In that silence, for the first time, I thought I might not leave that spot alive. Just one wrong twitch, one decision I couldn't control, and it would all end right there, on that stretch of road in Ohio, with no one knowing what happened. But just as fast as it started, it ended. Without a word, they holstered their guns, climbed back into their cars, and drove off. No sirens, no headlights, no taillights. Just vanished into the night like they'd never been there. The road went dark again, empty and endless. I sat there for a long time, still on my knees, trying to get my breath back, trying to stop my hands from shaking. When I finally stood, I looked at the mess. My parents' things were scattered across the shoulder and into the ditch. Boxes torn open, blankets half in the mud. I slowly picked it all up, one piece at a time, setting it back inside the car even though I knew I wasn't going anywhere without gas. It gave me something to do, something to keep my mind busy, because if I let myself think too much about what just happened, I knew I'd fall apart. I ended up spending the rest of the night right there, sitting on the hood again. But this time I didn't bother waving at the few cars that passed. I didn't want anyone else to stop. I didn't want to see more headlights cut through the dark. I just wanted daylight to come. The night was long. The cold sank deeper. Every little sound in the dark made me flinch. At some point I realized I hadn't had a sip of water in hours, but I didn't want to get up and dig through boxes again. I sat still, knees drawn up, staring at the black line of the road stretching in both directions. When the first faint glow of dawn touched the horizon, it felt like a weight lifting. By the time a farmer's pickup finally slowed down and pulled over, the sun was high enough to warm the frost from the grass. He gave me a ride to the station, no questions asked, just a nod when I said I ran out of gas. I filled a can, got back to my car, and drove the rest of the way in silence. I never told my parents what happened. Not then, not for years. Felt too strange, too hard to explain. Even now, I'm not sure what I stumbled into that night. But I know one thing with certainty. Whatever those cops were after, it wasn't me. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'll never forget the feeling of 5 guns aimed at me under that black Ohio sky, wondering if I'd live long enough to see the sun come up again. I had made the decision to take the long way home. It was one of those trips that didn't need to feel rushed, and I thought a slower drive through quieter stretches of desert would be better than the main highway. My son was in the back seat, curled up with his hoodie, playing with his phone, but looking out the window every now and then. We were both tired. Vegas had been loud, crowded, all flashing lights and noise. Phoenix felt like a world away, and I wanted the calm in between before we went back to our normal routine. The road we chose was nearly empty. It was the kind of desert highway where the silence seems to press against the glass of your car. The landscape rolled out flat and wide, only broken up by rocky hills and brush. The late afternoon sun was dropping low, casting long shadows across the road. The air outside looked dry and sharp, the sky that deep golden orange that only the desert can do. Inside the car, it was just us, the hum of the tires and the little rattle of loose change in the cup holder. At first, I thought it was just another driver headed the same direction. I noticed him in the rearview mirror about 20 minutes after we turned off the main highway. His car wasn't anything special, just a dark sedan with dusty paint. I didn't think much of it until I realized he was closing in fast, too fast. I stayed in my lane, steady, but soon enough he was right behind us. His headlights weren't on, but I could see the glare off his windshield in my mirror. He wasn't just behind me. He was riding my bumper. I eased over to the other lane, figuring he wanted to get past. But he didn't pass. He stayed there, hanging just a few feet off my bumper like he wanted to stick to me. I sped up a little, my hands tight on the wheel, waiting for him to go around. Nothing. He just stayed there, steady. Too close. The road stretched open ahead of us. No cars for miles, plenty of space, and yet he refused to move. I told myself it was just coincidence. Some people drove that way, careless, unaware how dangerous it was. Maybe he was distracted, maybe tired, maybe even drunk. But when I switched lanes again, a slow slide across the faded white line, he came right with me. His car shifted over like a shadow tied to mine. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just carelessness. This was deliberate. The desert around us felt even more empty now. No gas stations, no houses, not even a ranch fence. Just miles of cracked asphalt, wide sky, and someone I couldn't see sitting behind me. Deciding to play some game I didn't want to be part of. The sun was dropping lower, bleeding into the horizon, and I knew soon it would be dark. Out here, dark meant pitch black. No streetlights, no glow of nearby towns. Nothing but headlights and shadows. I tried to keep my breathing steady. My son was in the back seat, quiet, but I knew he noticed. He wasn't the type to ask questions right away, but kids sense things. He had sat up straighter, his phone forgotten, his eyes flicking toward the back window. I could feel the weight of his attention. The silent worry he didn't have words for yet. That made it worse. Fear for myself was one thing. Fear for him was a whole different beast. I sped up again, pushing the car harder. The speedometer crept past 70, then 80. The sedan behind me matched every move, tight, unrelenting. He wasn't trying to pass. He wasn't falling back. He was locked onto us. My mouth was dry, hands slick on the steering wheel. Every mile we put behind us seemed to stretch tighter, like the road itself was closing in. That was when I remembered the gun. I never carried it with me. It was something I kept at home, locked away, more of a precaution than anything. But for some reason, when I had been packing for the trip, I had grabbed it. I couldn't explain why. I wasn't the type to bring it along. Maybe it was some quiet nudge in the back of my head, some unshakable thought that told me, take it this time. And I had. It was sitting in the glove box, untouched the entire trip. Until now, I glanced at my son in the mirror. His eyes were wide, fixed on the back window, his face pale in the fading light. I didn't want to scare him more than he already was, but there was no hiding it anymore. I told him where the gun was. He hesitated, confused, but then leaned forward, reached into the glove box and pulled it out. The weight of it looked wrong in his hands, too heavy, too real for a kid his age. But he held it tight, careful, waiting for what I wanted him to do. The sedan was still there, relentless. Close enough now that I could see the outline of the man in the driver's seat, his face hidden in shadow, but his posture steady, focused. He wasn't weaving or jerking. He wasn't drunk. He was in control. He was choosing this. I told my son to lift the gun up so it was visible in the back window, just high enough that the man could see it if he was looking. My son did it, slow and careful, his arm trembling just slightly as he raised it. The gun glinted in the last smear of sunlight. For a few seconds, nothing changed. The car stayed behind us, locked in. My chest felt like it was going to crack open. Then suddenly he pulled back. The sedan dropped away, headlights shrinking in the mirror as he slowed. Then he sped off, swerving into the other lane and blasting past us, his tires kicking up dust. He didn't just pass, he bolted. His car shot forward like something had snapped inside him, like he couldn't get away fast enough. Within moments, he was nothing but a shrinking blur ahead of us, swallowed up by the desert road. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My whole body shook, my arms weak against the wheel. My son lowered the gun back into his lap, his face pale, his breathing quick. Neither of us said a word. The silence in the car was thick, the kind that fills every space. The desert seemed to press closer against the windows, the sky darker now, the sun almost gone. We drove the rest of the way with our eyes wide open, scanning the mirrors, jumping at every shift of shadow. I half expected to see his car again, waiting around some bend, hiding with its lights off. But he was gone. He hadn't just given up. He had decided in that instant that whatever plan he had wasn't worth it anymore. The sight of the gun had ended it. That was enough to drive him off. I don't know what he wanted. Maybe it was just intimidation, some twisted power trip. Maybe it was worse. Out on that empty stretch of road with no one else around, no help for miles, he could have done anything. And I knew it. I could feel it in the way he had followed me, matched me, refused to pass. That wasn't random. That wasn't careless driving. That was intent. And the gun, something I had never taken with me before, something I almost left at home, was the one thing that stopped him. We made it home hours later, exhausted, drained, both of us quiet the whole way. The city lights felt surreal after all that emptiness, like stepping back into a different world. My son carried his bag inside without a word. His shoulders slumped, his face still pale. I sat in the car for a long time before I went in. The gun still sitting in the glove box, heavier than it had ever felt. Even now, I think about it sometimes. About what would have happened if I hadn't taken that turn. If I hadn't grabbed the gun. If my son hadn't been with me to hold it up. About what that man had planned out there on that empty road. I'll never know for sure. But I know one thing. He wasn't just playing around. He had something in mind. Whatever it was, it ended the second he realized we weren't as helpless as he thought. We got lucky. Very lucky. We were in the middle of moving. One of those long, exhausting road trips where you're juggling logistics, fatigue, and the constant worry of keeping everything safe. My wife and I had decided to take 2 vehicles. It was the only way to get it done. I drove the truck, loaded down with as much as it could carry, and she drove the family car with the kids. We caravanned across states, leapfrogging each other at gas stations, keeping an eye out for each other's headlights in traffic, pulling off to rest stops together so nobody was stranded or alone. It wasn't exactly enjoyable, but it was what needed to be done. By the time we rolled into Gallup, New Mexico, we were running on fumes. Gallup wasn't a planned stop. It was just one of those situations where the kids were hungry. We were both tired, and we needed a break. The stretch of highway had felt endless, and the small towns we passed didn't exactly inspire confidence when it came to food or safety. Everything looked worn down, like the kind of places where you keep your head on a swivel and don't linger longer than necessary. We finally saw a Cracker Barrel right off the exit. It looked like the only decent spot around, at least clean enough and familiar enough to feel like a safe bet. Both of us were relieved just to pull into the lot and park side by side. The lot wasn't empty, but it wasn't crowded either. A handful of cars scattered across the asphalt, most of them dusty and dented. The kind of vehicles that looked like they'd seen a lot of hard miles. I remember thinking it wasn't the nicest area, but I was too hungry and tired to care. We went in, ordered, and tried to settle into some kind of normal family rhythm. The kids ate. My wife managed to smile for them, and I just tried to relax for a minute. I kept glancing out the window, though. Habit. The kind of habit you get from too many years on the road, or maybe just being a little paranoid. But even then, I noticed a couple of guys loitering out by the parking lot, drifting from car to car. At first, I didn't think much of it. People wander all the time, right? Some folks smoke outside or kill time waiting for a table. But the way these guys moved stuck with me. They weren't heading to the restaurant, and they weren't leaving. They were circling cars, heads leaned down toward windows, trying to peek inside. One guy had this casual slouch, but his eyes were working overtime. I filed it away in the back of my mind. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just bored. But my stomach tightened. We finished up, paid the check, and started toward the parking lot. The sun was bright, but it felt sharp, like the light didn't warm anything. My wife walked ahead with the kids, heading toward the car. I trailed a little behind, distracted for a moment with the receipt crumpled in my pocket. That's when I noticed the same 3 men again. They hadn't gone anywhere. In fact, they had drifted closer to where we had parked. My wife was wrestling the kids into their seats, one hand on the door and the other keeping track of bags and jackets. She was distracted like any parent in that moment, and that's when one of them made his move. He walked up fast but tried to look casual. Too casual. He was close-talking her, leaning near, pretending like he was just passing by, but his eyes weren't on her. They were on the inside of the car, scanning. One hand rested near the door frame like he had every right to be there. She didn't even register the threat immediately, too busy strapping in the kids. Something in me snapped. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the odds. I didn't remind myself I wasn't armed or trained for this. I just saw my wife boxed in, my kids half-buckled, and this stranger invading their space. I threw open my truck door so hard it slammed back against its hinges. I was across the asphalt in seconds, yelling before I even knew what words I was using. My body just reacted. I got up in his face, close enough to smell the stale cigarette smoke on his clothes, close enough to see the twitch in his jaw when he realized I wasn't bluffing. I barked at him to back off, pushing every ounce of anger into my voice, not giving him an inch. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. His eyes flicked to the side, where his two friends were standing a few cars away. They hadn't moved yet, but I could feel the weight of them. If they wanted to, they could have swarmed me. 3 against 1, no question who would win. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I knew right then how exposed I was. I wasn't Jason Bourne. I wasn't some action hero. I was just a tired guy moving his family across the country, running on too little sleep and too much caffeine. No weapon, no backup. Just me and a whole lot of adrenaline. But noise has power. People were eating inside. Cars were still coming and going from the lot. My voice was carrying. Heads were turning. And the man in front of me seemed to register that fact. He didn't back up right away, but his body shifted. His stance loosened, and he threw a look at his buddies like he was checking for their read on the situation. They weren't charging in. They were watching too, weighing if this was worth it. In the end, I think the attention was what killed it. I had made enough of a scene that it wasn't a clean opportunity anymore. The guy finally stepped back. Not a rush, not even an apology. Just this slow, deliberate retreat, like he wanted me to know it was his choice. His eyes stayed locked on mine until the last second, and then he broke away, rejoining the other two. They didn't say a word. They just drifted off, casual again, moving back through the lot like nothing had happened. I didn't breathe until they were out of sight. My wife had frozen for most of it, trying to keep the kids calm, but I could see the shock on her face. My hands were shaking when I opened the driver's side door. We didn't linger, didn't talk. We just got in and pulled out, the caravan back in motion. But now every mile out of Gallup felt like it couldn't pass fast enough. The drive after that was a blur. My adrenaline crash left me exhausted, hands gripping the wheel too tight. Every car we passed, every gas station we stopped at, I was scanning, hyper-aware. It didn't stop until hours later, when the kids were asleep in the back, and the highway finally stretched into quieter country. It hit me then just how close it had been. If they'd decided to jump, it wouldn't have been a contest. Maybe I scared them off, maybe I just got lucky, but the truth was simple. Luck isn't a strategy. I couldn't shake the image of them circling the cars, waiting for someone to slip, waiting for that moment when nobody was paying attention. Not long after that trip, I went and got my CCW permit. It wasn't about playing hero or looking for a fight. It was about not being caught that vulnerable again. Not standing there with nothing but my voice while my family was cornered. We made one more family rule too. Gallup, New Mexico, never again. We don't stop there. Not for gas, not for food, not for anything. Some places you pass through, and some places you learn to avoid. That one carved itself into our history with sharp edges I'll never forget. And to this day, whenever I pull into a parking lot on a long road trip, I still scan. I still feel that knot in my stomach, the weight of that afternoon pressing down, reminding me just how fast ordinary can turn dangerous. I was driving home late in the evening, the sky already dark, the kind of night where the air feels heavy and still. I wasn't in a rush, but I also wasn't dragging along. Just another stretch of road, another quiet night. Out there, far from the city, the only real light came from my headlights and the occasional distant farmhouse with a porch light left on. I'd taken that road 100 times before, never once thinking anything about it. Just a ribbon of pavement cutting through fields and patches of trees. I didn't see the crash happen. I just came up on it. First, I thought maybe a truck had broken down, or a small grass fire had started along the shoulder. The air smelled strange before I even saw it fully. Burning rubber, something sharp, chemical. When I rounded a slight bend, it all came into view at once. 2 cars, or what was left of them, and fire. The flames were small but fierce. licking up into the night sky with a glow that looked unnatural in that kind of darkness. One car was in the middle of the road, front end completely destroyed, parts scattered everywhere. The second car I barely registered at first. It was far off, down an embankment on the opposite side, so mangled and twisted it looked more like wreckage from an explosion than a car. I pulled over fast and grabbed my phone, but the service out there was awful. It took me a couple of tries to get through. I told them what I saw, gave the mile marker and landmarks, then just shoved my phone in my pocket and ran. The first sound that hit me was screaming. It wasn't loud, not like in the movies. It was raw, guttural, broken, coming from the driver of the car still on the road. She was trapped inside, pinned by the wreckage. The fire hadn't fully taken the car yet, but it was creeping. The hood was burning hot, smoke pouring out, and the inside of the car glowed faintly from small flames working their way through the dashboard. She was burned. Bad. I could see it even in the flicker of the firelight. Skin blackened and peeling, patches raw and bleeding, clothes seared into her body. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. She was still alive, still fighting, still conscious. Her passenger, though, wasn't. The other door had been torn open by the crash or maybe by the fire, and the woman inside had been thrown out. I caught sight of her in the grass, maybe 20 feet from the car. Her body was twisted, limp, half covered by burning grass. Some people who had stopped before me were stomping out the fire around her. It didn't matter. She was gone. Even from where I stood, I could see it. She was young, pregnant. The thought of that hit me like a weight to the chest. But the driver was still alive. That was where I went. I dropped down beside the wreck and tried to figure out what I could do. The metal was bent and smoking, the heat intense even standing near it. There was no pulling her out. I knew it as soon as I tried. Everything was crushed in around her, and she was part of that wreck now. So I just stayed. I crouched down close as I could get without the heat blistering me, and I tried to keep her steady. The fire hissed and popped. The acrid smoke burned my throat and her breathing was ragged. I don't even know how she managed to stay awake. She looked straight at me sometimes, her eyes swollen but still clear, and it felt like she was begging me not to leave. Minutes dragged on like hours. I don't know how many times I looked down the road hoping to see flashing lights, hoping to hear sirens. The night stayed quiet except for the fire, the faint shouts of the others stamping out grass flames and her breathing. I never once thought she would survive. The burns were too severe, her body broken in too many ways. I kept waiting for her to fade out, for her chest to stop moving, but somehow she hung on. I had no words that could matter. Nothing I could do except be there. My hands shook, my throat was dry, and the smell of burned flesh is something I'll never forget. Eventually, after what felt like forever, I heard sirens in the distance. By then, the second car caught my eye for the first time. It was down the embankment, barely visible, but I could make out its shape better when flames flared. Crushed flat upside down, metal glowing red. Nobody was coming out of that one. 2 lives gone in there. I didn't even try to get close. There was no point. The emergency crews arrived fast once they got there, but it had been nearly half an hour since I called. They swarmed in with hoses and lights and tools. I stepped back, covered in ash and sweat, hands trembling. The driver was still alive when they pulled her from the wreck. Barely. They wrapped her, rushed her, and I honestly didn't think she'd make it to the hospital. I stood there numb, watching the scene play out. Flames hosed down, bodies covered. The smell of burned rubber and gasoline mixing with the sharp tang of blood and smoke. I remember the flashing lights painting everything red and blue. And I remember feeling like I'd just stepped out of my own life and into someone else's nightmare. When they finally told me I could leave, I sat in my car with the engine off for a long time. My clothes stank, my hands were filthy, my head was pounding. I kept seeing her face every time I blinked, kept hearing the faint sound of her breathing, the rasp of her pain, and that broken body in the grass, the pregnant girl, flames crawling toward her. That image has never left me. Days passed, weeks, I didn't hear anything. I assumed she died. It felt impossible she could survive what I saw. And honestly, part of me hoped she hadn't, just so her pain would have ended. It sounds cruel, but that's the truth of it. Almost a year later, just before Christmas, I got a card in the mail. No return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a simple holiday card, nothing fancy, but the message inside stopped me cold. She thanked me for staying with her that night, for not letting her be alone. She said the doctors told her there was no medical reason she should have lived, but she did, and she remembered me. I sat at my kitchen table holding that card, reading it over and over, not even sure how to process it. Somehow she'd found my name, my address, and she was alive enough to write to me. Alive enough to keep going after something that should have ended her life. But for me, that night never really ended. I still see the fire, still hear the sound of her trying to breathe, still smell the burning. 3 dead, one who lived against every possible chance, and me, stuck with those images burned into my brain, knowing no holiday card in the world could erase them. That was the night I learned how fragile everything really is, how fast life can be torn apart. You drive down a quiet road in the dark, thinking about nothing, and then you're kneeling beside someone whose body is half gone, waiting for sirens that take forever. You tell yourself you helped, but the truth is you just watched. You couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it. You were just there, standing still while lives ended all around you. And no matter how much time passes, that never leaves you. It's always right there, waiting like the smell of smoke clinging to clothes you thought you'd washed clean. I still remember my very first solo run, and I wish I could say I look back on it with pride. But the truth is, it still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. It was up in northern Wisconsin, the dead of winter, middle of February, when the air itself feels heavy, and the silence of the world has a weight to it. I woke up at 4 in the morning in the cab, my body stiff and my throat dry, and the first thing I noticed was the sound of the wind pushing against the truck. When I slid out of the bunk and looked through the windshield, I saw snow had already piled up outside, 3 or 4 inches of it blanketing everything I could see. It wasn't the light, fluffy kind of snow you brush off with your hand. It was the kind that comes down thick, wet, and steady, sticking to every surface it touches, making the world a uniform white that hides all the lines and edges. The pit in my stomach told me I shouldn't even be on the road that morning. I'd only just started, and already I was telling myself that maybe it would be better to call in, to wait a few hours, to let the plows and salt trucks do their job. But it was my first solo run, my first delivery. The thought of making that phone call, of admitting that I was late because I didn't want to fight through snow, didn't sit right with me. I thought they'll have the interstate plowed. They've got to. That's what interstates are for. If there's any road they'll clear first, it's that one. I convinced myself it would be fine. I should have trusted my gut. The moment I merged onto the interstate, it was obvious. They hadn't plowed a thing. The asphalt wasn't asphalt anymore, not really. It was just a wide, endless stretch of snow and ice, broken only by 2 faint tire tracks that curved through the white. Those tracks were the only guide I had, the only suggestion of where the pavement actually ran. There were no visible lane markers. The snow swallowed everything, and the world felt stripped down to 2 things: my headlights cutting out a cone of weak yellow against the white curtain of falling snow, and the dim black shadows of the tire grooves I clung to like they were lifelines. I had the road to myself. No cars in front, none behind, nothing coming from the opposite direction. It felt wrong, like I had wandered into some empty world where no one else had survived. I gripped the wheel tight, hunched forward, trying to make out where the road ended and where the ditch began. Every few minutes the snow would pick up again, thickening to the point where I couldn't tell if I was moving at 50 miles an hour or standing still in a snow globe. The scariest part wasn't even the driving. It was the knowing I couldn't stop. The exits were worse than the road itself. The shoulders weren't shoulders anymore, just piles of snow blending into ditches. If I pulled over, the best case scenario was getting myself buried and needing a tow. Worst case, I'd slide right off into some dark field and no one would even know until spring thaw. I was locked into the tracks, forced forward, no way to bail. The hours stretched thin. My chest ached from the way I kept breathing shallow, every muscle in my arms tense. The snow came down in relentless sheets, each flake hitting the windshield and streaking away under the wipers that already squealed in protest. The heater blasted against my legs, but I still felt cold. The kind of cold that comes from nerves, and not from air temperature. I tried not to think about the fact that there was no one else around me. I told myself it was fine, that maybe traffic just hadn't picked up yet because of the hour. But deep down I knew it wasn't normal. An hour in, the sky started to lighten. It wasn't a sunrise in the usual sense, with colors bleeding across the horizon. It was more like the black faded to a different shade of gray, the edges of trees and fences slowly appearing on either side of the interstate. That shift should have brought me relief, but instead it just showed me more clearly how buried everything was. The fence lines were nearly gone under drifts. The trees were hunched under weight, their branches bent low and motionless. The whole world was sagging under the storm. That was when the truck's coolant sensor decided to betray me. At first it was just a beep, a sudden shrill alarm cutting through the low hum of the engine and heater fans. My eyes shot down to the dash, and there it was, a red warning flashing like an angry heartbeat. Low coolant. Engine shut down in 60 seconds. I nearly choked on my own breath. The countdown started ticking. 59, 58, 57. My eyes darted between the dash and the windshield, my hands sweating on the wheel. I knew, at least I thought I knew, that it had to be a malfunction. The engine temp was sitting right where it should be. No overheating, no spikes. Just the damn sensor deciding to lose its mind at the worst possible time. But that knowledge didn't help much when I imagined the engine dropping into limp mode right there, in the middle of nowhere with snow piling higher by the minute. I saw myself coasting to a stop, the truck going dead silent, the heater fading until the cab turned into a freezer. No shoulders, no exits, no way to get moving again without help that might not come for hours. I saw myself trapped there, headlights slowly dying, snow swallowing the cab until I was just another mound in the endless white. The timer would hit 30, sometimes 20, and then reset itself back to 60. Over and over, teasing me, jerking my heart up and down like a puppet on strings. I kept glancing at the gauges, then back to the road, then back to the gauges, my pulse thudding against my ribs so hard it hurt. Every mile was torture. Every minute felt like I was being timed. A bomb about to go off under the hood. I don't think I've ever prayed harder without actually saying a word. Then, through the falling snow ahead, I saw it. A strobing amber light cutting faintly through the storm. At first I thought it was a hallucination, the way the brain conjures things when it's desperate. But the closer I got, the clearer it became. A plow. A massive steel-nosed plow clearing one lane, moving steady like some guardian beast carving a path through hell. I nearly sobbed when I saw it. I tucked in behind it, the road finally something more than two thin tire tracks. For the first time in hours, I let out a breath without it catching in my throat. I followed the plow all the way off the interstate, down a ramp that would have been invisible without it, and into the parking lot of a Quick Trip. The moment I put the truck in park, my body gave out. My hand slipped off the wheel, my forehead dropped against it, and I screamed into the leather, the sound muffled and raw. Not words, just the release of everything I had been holding back since 4 in the morning. My eyes stung and I let them. I stayed there until my breathing slowed, until the adrenaline drained enough for me to move again. I made the delivery on time. Somehow I did. But that morning burned itself into me. The feeling of being utterly alone on that highway, trapped in motion with no way to stop, counting down the seconds until the truck might betray me. It carved itself deep. I told myself I'd never do that again. And I meant it. Because sometimes the scariest thing in the world isn't what's hiding in the dark. It's the silence of an empty road, the snow swallowing the world, and a machine deciding it might quit on you when quitting isn't an option. It was Super Bowl Sunday, cold and gray, and I was sitting on the side of I-55 outside Chicago with my truck broken down. I remember the way the air felt, like it was pressing down on me. The highway was still busy, cars flying past, people heading to wherever they were planning to watch the game. I had already called emergency maintenance, talked to my company, and I was just sitting there, waiting. My hazard lights were flashing, my triangles were out, and the sound of traffic rushing by was constant. I felt exposed sitting on the shoulder like that, but I didn't have any other choice. My trailer was heavy, and I wasn't going to risk pulling further without power. It hadn't even been 5 minutes since I'd gotten off the phone when it happened. Out of nowhere, I felt the hardest impact I've ever felt in my life. It was like my whole truck jumped forward. The sound of metal smashing against metal was so loud it drowned out everything else, and before I even processed it, I saw the blur of a car launching into the air in my side mirror. It was surreal, almost like a movie scene, but it was real, right there, not even 10 feet from me. The guy had slammed into my ICC bar so hard that his car bounced upward, spinning and landing sideways. For a second, I just sat there, stunned, my ears ringing, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to tear through my chest. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. My voice cracked when I tried to tell them what had just happened. I gave them the location, mile marker, everything as best as I could. Then I called my company back, my voice still shaky, to let them know I'd just been hit. They told me to stay put and wait for the police. I hung up and sat there in silence, the smell of burnt rubber and coolant already filling the air. Steam was rising from the car behind me. My triangles were scattered all over the road, smashed into pieces from the impact. When the police arrived, I thought things would get easier, but instead, the first officer who came up to me didn't waste a second before laying into me. He was shouting over the roar of the traffic about my triangles, about my flashers, about my logs, about why I had broken down in the first place. His words were sharp, like he was ready to pin the whole thing on me right then and there. He told me I'd be paying for this, that I hadn't done what I was supposed to. My stomach dropped. I was already shaken from the hit, and now I felt like I was about to lose my job, my license, everything. I tried to keep my mouth shut, standing there under those flashing lights, trucks flying past, feeling smaller by the second. But then another officer came up, calmer, and told the first one to back off. He said the driver had admitted to drinking. Just like that, the air shifted. The first cop's anger stopped cold, and suddenly it wasn't all on me anymore. The drunk guy was sitting on the side of the road, slumped and dazed, with his car crumpled like a soda can. I watched him talking to the officers, his words slurring, and all I could think about was how close I came to being dead if he'd hit me just a little harder or at a different angle. The wreck had left my trailer bent and damaged, my ICC bar crushed and my triangles destroyed. The cleanup crew arrived, hooking up the truck and trailer to tow it away. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear down the road, and then I was just left on the side of the highway with nothing but the clothes I had on and the roar of engines passing me by. My company hadn't called me back yet, and I had no idea what to do. I asked the police for a ride to somewhere safe, but they told me no. Just like that, I was stranded. The cleanup guys must have seen the look on my face because one of them offered to drop me off at a 7-Eleven nearby. I climbed into their truck, still shaking from everything, and they dropped me in the lot under the bright fluorescent lights. The smell of gas and hot food hit me as soon as I walked inside. It was warm, but I felt out of place. I bought a cheap cup of coffee just to have something in my hands, something warm. I sat there in one of the booths by the window, watching traffic out on the road, replaying the crash in my head again and again. When I finally got a hold of my company again, it didn't make things better. They told me I was being placed out of service while they investigated. I'd be out of work for at least a week, maybe longer. They even mentioned possible termination. My stomach twisted. I had just been sitting there, broken down doing what I was supposed to, and now I was the one paying for it. The drunk driver was taken away, his car totaled, and I was left with the fallout. That week felt like it stretched forever. I stayed in cheap motels, waited for calls that didn't come, and worried every night about whether I was about to lose my job. The sound of that crash replayed in my dreams, waking me up in a cold sweat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his car flying into the air, my triangles scattering, the officer yelling at me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Eventually, my company called and told me I could come back. They weren't firing me. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt drained, like the fight had taken something out of me. The first few months back on the road were rough. Every time I pulled onto the shoulder for any reason, even just to check something, I felt my chest tighten. I'd glance in the mirrors every few seconds, waiting for headlights to veer off, waiting for the impact. The sound of tires hitting rumble strips behind me made my heart race. I'd gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. It took me a long time to find any kind of rhythm again. I kept thinking about how close I had come to being gone. Just like that, all because someone decided to drink and drive on Super Bowl Sunday. The damage wasn't just to my trailer or my triangles, it was to me too. Now whenever I pass that stretch of I-55, I can't help but look to the shoulder. I can still picture myself standing there under the flashing lights, feeling like everything was about to collapse. I know I was lucky to walk away, but that night left a mark I'll never forget. It wasn't ghosts or monsters. It was just real life, and real life can be just as scary. One drunk driver, one moment, and everything can change. That's what sticks with me most. I still remember that night like it's burned into the back of my skull. It's one of those memories that doesn't fade with time, no matter how much you want it to. It comes back in flashes. Black road, cold air, the smell of diesel, and then that blinding white light swallowing me whole. I was still a rookie, driving solo for the first time in my life, trying to prove I could handle the long hauls without someone riding shotgun or checking my every move. I thought I had it down, thought I was paying attention, thought I was calm and steady enough to take on anything the road threw at me. But that night reminded me how fast things can go sideways when you least expect it. It was around 2 in the morning. I'd been driving for hours, the kind of stretch where the road seems endless, and the only thing keeping you awake is the low hum of the tires on asphalt and the occasional rattle of something in the cab. I was tired. Not the kind of tired where your eyes close on you, but the bone-deep kind, where everything feels heavier than it should. The world outside was pitch black, no moon, no streetlights, no other vehicles. Just me, the truck, and the road ahead. The kind of dark that eats at you, swallows everything outside the headlights. I remember rolling my shoulders, trying to loosen the stiffness. The way the straps of the seatbelt rubbed against my chest with every breath. The road dipped down through a section lined with big trees, thick trunks and branches pushing up close on either side. Even in daylight it would have been narrow and claustrophobic, but at night it felt worse, like driving through a tunnel made of shadows. The air smelled damp, earthy, like the trees were holding on to the last bit of daytime warmth. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel ahead of me, the beams catching flashes of bark and low-hanging limbs. Beyond that, nothing. Pure black. I knew the tracks were coming up. I'd crossed them plenty of times before, but usually in daylight or at least during the early evening, when there was still some life around. That night, though, it was just me. I slowed down a little as the warning signs came up, my tires bumping gently over the rough patches leading to the crossing. No gates, no flashing lights, just a pair of tracks cutting through the road and disappearing into the trees. I glanced both ways, but the dark swallowed everything. Nothing was coming. No vibration in the air. No low rumble of steel on steel. Just silence. I figured I was good, so I started across. The first thump of the tires over the rails was nothing, just the usual jolt. But halfway through, everything exploded. From the right side, out of nowhere, a blinding white light hit me. It wasn't just bright. It was like the sun had dropped out of the sky and slammed straight into my cab. My whole vision was filled with it. My chest clenched. Every nerve lit up like I'd been shocked. At the same exact moment, A horn blasted through the night, a deep gut-punching roar that rattled the mirrors and seemed to shake the air itself. My body reacted before my brain did. I yanked the wheel hard left, straight into the opposite lane, the tires screaming against the pavement. For a split second, I thought that was it. I thought the side of the truck was going to be ripped open like a can, that I'd feel steel crushing in and glass exploding, that everything would just end right there in the middle of nowhere. The sound of that horn still vibrated in my chest, and the light stayed with me even as I swerved, burning white after-images into my eyes, and then silence. Just the whine of my tires pulling me across the road, the engine straining. My breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a scream. I straightened out the wheel and forced the truck back into my lane, hands clenched so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles burned. My whole body shook, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it was trying to punch its way out of me. For a few seconds, I couldn't even tell if I was still alive or just waiting for the hit that never came. I eased the truck forward, finally clearing the tracks, and my mind caught up to what just happened. The bastard train wasn't even moving. It was just sitting there, the crew shining their spotlight across the crossing like some kind of sick joke. The horn was still echoing in my skull, and in the rearview mirror I caught a glimpse of movement inside the cab of the engine. They were laughing. I couldn't hear it, but I knew. You can tell when someone is doubled over, shoulders shaking, faces grinning like they just pulled the funniest stunt of their lives. I pulled the truck over to the shoulder and just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My chest rose and fell too fast, my fingers twitching on the wheel, the veins in my forearms standing out like ropes. I stared at the reflection of my own headlights bouncing off the road signs ahead, the trees swaying just enough in the wind to catch my eye. Every sound felt sharper, the ticking of the engine, the faint rustle of branches, even my own breath sounding too loud inside the cab. I thought about how close I'd come. A fraction of a second slower, a fraction harder on the wheel, and I might have rolled that truck. Nobody else was out there. Nobody would have known until sunrise, maybe later, when someone came through and found the wreck. My family would have gotten the call that I was gone, all because some assholes wanted a laugh at 2 a.m. The thought made my stomach turn, and I sat there for a long time staring at nothing, letting the adrenaline drain out of me. Eventually I shifted back into gear and pulled away, the tracks shrinking in the mirror. The train was still parked there, the cab glowing faintly with the crew's movements. I didn't look again. I didn't want to see them laughing. Didn't want to give them the satisfaction. The rest of that night felt longer than any run I'd ever done. Every shadow felt like it was leaning in too close. Every noise made me jump. Even hours later, I couldn't get the light out of my eyes. It was seared there, a reminder of how small you really are when you're up against something bigger, heavier, and meaner than you. I kept driving, but I knew something in me had shifted. It's been years, but the memory hasn't dulled. I can still hear that horn, feel the blinding shock of that light hitting me out of nowhere. I can still feel the truck lurching left, the road vanishing under me, the certainty that I was about to die. And I can still see them in the mirror, shaking with laughter like it was all just harmless fun. That night taught me something about the road, about people, and about myself. You can't trust the silence, you can't trust the dark, and you sure as hell can't trust anyone else to look out for you. At the end of the day, it's you against everything. The road, the weather, the machines, and sometimes even the people who are supposed to know better. I survived that crossing, but it left me with scars you can't see. Every time I come to a set of tracks now, no matter where or when, I slow down more than I need to. I check twice, sometimes 3 times, left and right, letting the seconds tick by. I can't help it. The memory of that horn and that light sits on my shoulder, whispering what could have been. I never saw those train guys again, and maybe that's for the best. I don't know what I would have done if I had. Maybe I would have said something, maybe I would have just walked away. Doesn't matter now. What matters is that I kept driving, kept working, kept moving forward. But that night will always ride with me, tucked away in the dark parts of my memory, waiting for quiet hours when it sneaks back out, and reminds me just how close I came to being another story people tell. And every time I think about it, every time that memory flares up, I can still feel my heart slam in my chest like it's trying to leave me behind. It's the one part of me that never really came back into the cab. It stayed there, on that crossing, frozen in the blinding light of a train that never even moved.